and welcome to this week's review on My Hero Academia Vigilantes. This week I'm reviewing the episode titled Investigation Start, Steamy Romance Spotted. Oh, what a title! We kick off this review as we always do with these reviews by talking about the positives and the headline positives, all the things I enjoyed about this particular episode. I like the way Nick was able to balance so much material in such a short period of time. I enjoy how much of the humour in this episode is character based, and I like the way it's able to bring in main series cast members in a way that feels practical and in a way that feels, well, more realistic than I think we've had more recently. I will just say that this episode has one hell of a title. It almost feels like the Dragon Ball word salad things, where it just like two different sentences clashing into one another, and it just almost entirely either explains the entire episode, or it just feels really like so much of a non sequitur. Like, a lot of the episodes of Dragon Ball end up feeling somewhat like, onions for soup? Look out, Goku, it's the Libyans! And I'm sure that this episode's title will be perfectly SEO compliant, and all those exclamation marks will not in any way, shape or form help to undermine this video at all. But anyway, let us actually talk about this episode itself. And I have to say is that this is an episode that covers a lot of ground, and I'm happy to say that it's able to manage to balance all the different things that it introduces into this very well in such a short period of time. Now, in fairness, it doesn't do it to quite the same extent that we had with the prior episode, as it felt as though we had far more things going on with that particular episode. This week, however, we've only got really two focuses, that being Crawler feeling like a bit of a spare part and Eraserhead's investigation. And even then it was more focused on Eraserhead and what he's doing more so than Crawler. And everything with Crawler just makes that little line that we get from the guy from the Recycle Hoppers feel rather relevant, where he says, "You don't seem too useful," which, yeah, he really doesn't, does he? Like, in any situation, almost any episode that he's involved in. Certainly not this week. I mean, there was a part of me that was hoping that this would be the moment he'd go out and prove himself, to prove that he isn't just this spare part, that he can go out there and do other things, that he can be a hero, that he can be a vigilante and save the day, and no matter how big or small it is, even if to lean back into the days of him being Mr. Nice Guy. But he doesn't. He just kind of bums about for a little bit, just floats about, not really doing much of a muchness. And what we do end up seeing with him is fun enough, I will say, though I'd hate to keep accepting fun enough and good enough as just being the basic mark of being acceptable. But at least within this particular episode, his level of involvement in all of this makes sense. It makes sense here, probably more so than it's been for quite a long time, that he'd be quite as much of a passive observer as he is. Everyone else is just far too busy and involved with other things. Popstep and the other performers are rehearsing for the Sky Egg gig. Knuckle Duster is walking off to Hong Kong. Midnight is doing something that probably should get her cancelled. Eraserhead is doing his investigations, and the Recycle Hoppers just want to work in peace. So you'd think that with all this going on, that, you know, with Crawler being a university student, he'd want to go off and, I don't know, go to the pub, or go get a coffee, or play a video game. Oh, or study or something. But, you know, he just wanders the street like a lost lamb looking for someone to talk to. And it's probably the most relatable he's been in weeks, to be honest. There he is, just trying to find something to do with himself, something to give himself a little bit more of a meaning, a little bit more of agency. Granted, it's not quite the level of agency I think that he needs for a story like this, but it's fine for what it is. And again, I hate having to use that word. And I don't mind him being passive in this way, because he's still aware of things that are happening around him. He isn't totally passive and totally absent from the story in quite the same way as he has been more recently. Granted, a lot of that comes down to the sheer fact that he just seems to cross paths with Eraserhead and the Crab Cop Lady, and then puts two and two together, and then uses that to spread a little bit of gossip. But, you know, it does at least make sense. He's a witness, secondary, third-hand witness to some of the stuff that's happening by sheer happenstance of him being there, more so than more recently where he just disappeared from the story for extended periods. Like, how he's presented here and how he has this secondary, second-hand witness stuff to all of this does feel like it's more keeping with what we'd see with Midoriya. But at least here it makes a lot more sense. Like, he's seeing Eraserhead and the Crab Cop Lady, and he's thinking about things, and he doesn't know what's going on. He's not getting directly involved with all of that as much as he tries to be. But, you know, it's fine. I like that, as the does at least make it feel as though he's a little bit more of a present presence within the story, which, you know, present kind of feels a bit redundant, but you get the idea. Because in almost any other circumstances, almost any other point in this series thus far, he'd just be off camera doing something else of not great importance, but here he is, he's just being here, and he's seeing these things just happen around him, with him being a passive observer to the setup for stuff, which is okay. I mean, it's not much, but it's better than what we've had recently. This whole sequence of events with his involvement in all this is a lot of just light-hearted fun. It's stuff that's enjoyable in and of itself, but it's okay as far as a B-plot is concerned, with him just looking for something to do. That I would wish that in this episode there had been more of him looking for something to do. That he was trying to do something with his free time, seeing as everyone else is busy or preoccupied with other things. Or at the very least, please, for God's sake, investigate something! Even if it's just a pickpocket, even if it's just some minor crime thing, he needs to be more active in this story. Just some little B-plot that involves him trying to solve some problem. Even if, like I said previously, it ultimately just boils down to him just being Mr. Nice Guy for a little bit. Some little girl's balloon starts floating away and he has to try and get it back, or he's trying to get a cat out of a tree. Just have him doing something else doing all of this, rather than just being there, kind of floating about a bit. But still, like I say, it makes sense, and I do like that way that if he's going to be a passive observer in this, he at least has some kind of tangential connection to the story. Like him going out and seeing Eraserhead with the crab cop lady, he's thinking that those two are an item, and he's started to spread that about, and hey, that could boil over into some other thing, a little bit of innuendo, a little bit of celebrity gossip that could end up undermining the investigation in some way, or at the very least lead to some teasing from the recycle hopper guys onto Eraserhead. Like, that at least feels as though he's contributing something to the story, rather than him just standing in the background and not really doing much of a muchness and letting everyone else do the work. But still, it's good. It's better than we've had more recently, but again, as I've said, I want him to be doing far more. All of this ends up balancing out very well with the main focus of the episode, which is Eraserhead doing this deeper investigation into the Monster Factory, who may be connected to some kind of big pharma company, or it's being used as a means to distribute it without them knowing, which I am kind of willing to call a little bit of bullshit here. And I don't mean that in the sense of, oh, I mean it on a story level, like, oh, that's not giving me the case that this big pharma company is actually going to be the Monster Factory. I mean it more on a practical point of view, because yeah, given the size of this operation, I really doubt that this big pharma company is being used as a front without their knowledge, as that is a point that is brought up in all this. Oh sure, your average Joe and Jane working for the company might not. Your staff member might not know that, oh, it's also being used for criminal activity, but for an operation of this scale, yeah, this isn't really an operation that could be used as a front without anybody knowing about it. I mean, usually when companies and businesses, large or small, are being used as a front for a criminal organisation, it's being done with the people involved knowing about it and being willing or unwilling participants in it, depending on the nature in which this is being used as a front. And something on this scale would be hard to cover up, so yeah, if it's being used as a front, the people involved in it know it, even if the people actually making the stuff don't know that it's being used for illegal activities. Because let's face it, if it's being used for all of this, it's either, as they suggest, being used just as a case of distribution. You know, they're sneaking some of this stuff into some of the deliveries, like they were doing with the crab snack company, which is more acceptable, but it still doesn't make it a front. That just means that it's being used as a distribution thing. They're hijacking the distribution network. It doesn't make them a front. To be fair, this is criminality stuff that you don't... Whatever, you get the idea. It's an improper use of the terminology, and if you're going to use this terminology, use it correctly. Alternatively, it's being a case that these facilities are being used to make Trigger, which makes a lot more sense given the scale of all of this and given just how much they're able to tweak and alter it, and the fact that we have these genetically modified villains, so it makes more sense that it would be used directly to it. Because you can't really do this thing on the sly. It's not like they just say to some of the scientists, okay now, it's time for the evening shift. We're all going to go home now, so don't you be making any monster serums whilst we're away. Bye-bye. And then you just get one of the scientists turning to the other going, Jesse, we need a cook. Oh, sure thing, White Sensei. Yeah, science, backer. Which, yes, I know, not the translation, but you get the idea. This isn't something you could just sneakily do on the side. This isn't some kind of thing of, oh, whilst everyone's away, we cook up some of this nasty, evil drug thing, and no one's going to know. Because they'd bloody know. Like, seriously, look, not to get in too much of a tangent here, but when I used to work back at the kiosk, every single thing that we sold was monitored. They knew if you cheekily nicked a drink. So if they knew that you sneakily nicked a drink, they're gonna know if you're taking chemicals on the side to make this super secret monster serum. They're gonna know about it. So whatever, you get the idea. I don't buy the thing of, oh, it's being a front and they don't know about it. They might play the off as, oh, we didn't know about it at some point in the story when it ends up getting connected to it. But, yeah, I get it. Look, I know that on a more practical level, that you can't have someone saying, oh, yeah, this pharma company is being used to distribute illegal drugs and do illegal things. You know, you can't do that without being taken to court. And it makes sense to be a little bit cagey about all of that. And from the point of view of a police investigation, they're not going to address that as being their main focus until they have a little bit more evidence to do that. But in the here and now, the way they're saying it feels less of a matter of, oh, we're keeping our options open, being open-minded, and more like them fudging the narrative because they don't want us to put two and two together and go, oh yeah, so this is going to be the big bad guy, so when are we going to get smart and start clobbering heads? Because, you know, it's one thing for them to say, oh, we can't say for certain if this pharma company is doing anything illegal, we need to be open-minded. I could understand that, but given the amount of work they do to bend over backwards to say, okay, audience, these might not actually be the bad guys. I know there's a lot of evidence to suggest that they actually are, but we'll say that for the time being, at least, that they aren't, which feels a bit of a bloody cop-out, and I don't think we really need to do it because, yeah, it makes total sense, and if you're trying to backtrack something you've already just written, you shouldn't really be backtracking. You could just change what you've written. Like, this isn't like doing improv and you need to, accidentally, on second thoughts, no, it isn't this, it's somewhere else, but whatever, it doesn't matter, it's fine. This whole stuff that we get with Eraserhead, even if I think that some of the practicalities of the investigation at this point, with them trying to second guess the whole thing of whether or not the big pharma company is being used as a front for, or being involved in some way this monster factory stuff, you know, aside from all that stuff, I like the way it's put together, as ultimately this and the stuff with Crawler don't undermine one another. There's no sense of either one of them stepping on each other's toes, and they interweave with one another in a way that ends up making it feel as though this is enjoyable. Much like the previous episode, this does have the structure and presentation of it, of something that feels more like the anime, more like an anime episode where you're able to make these jumps in focus and have these different plot points overlap with one another in a way that makes it feel as though this is more of an organic viewing experience. And yes, I will say that of all the things that they should be learning from the anime, I'm not sure that just simply the structure is enough. I still think that we need more of a active and proactive protagonist, but that's a discussion for all of the time. I will say, though, that, as I mentioned in my headline positives, I do like the way in which his humour is presented, and this whole investigation and the setup for that investigation does give us a fine opening for more humour, as Fat Gum and the Crab Cop Lady are back! And they're helping with the investigation, with Crab Cop Lady and Eraserhead going undercover, and with Fat Gum going deeper into morbid obesity. I like the banter and the dynamic that we do get with Fat Gum and the Crab Cop Lady, as I do think it's a fun little dynamic. It feels more like a classic superhero flavoured duo with them bantering and joking one another, and their powers and abilities feel like they complement each other. It feels more like something you'd see in more of a classic comic book than necessarily something you would end up seeing from My Hero Academia. And it's something I do like. The dynamic between a hero and their sidekick is something that just isn't explored really at all in either series, which is kind of a little bit baffling, but sure, we'll accept that for what it is. And once they aren't a hero and sidekick, they still have a good dynamic of that, and they do feel somewhat similar to all of that. I do like the banter and the dynamic, or rather the lack thereof, between Crab Cop Lady and Eraserhead. I enjoy when the humour in this series and the main series is character driven or based on character, even if it just ultimately boils down to them ripping into whichever character they're talking about at the time, which is what they end up doing here, because once they've got decided, okay, these guys are going to work together, you have Eraserhead and Crab Cop Lady going off to do their undercover stuff, which is them putting on disguises. Now, given what we end up seeing with all of this, I will admit, and this is something of a negative, is that there doesn't seem to be much rhyme or reason for what they're wearing other than just it being a case of a gag, which is fair enough, and they don't spend too long on this, so it's not as though it's overstaying their welcome. It does end up leading to my favourite gag in the episode, where you got Eraserhead complaining about wearing a suit, and then you end up getting the cop lady saying, "Oh, you'll have to get used to wearing a suit because one day you'll need to suit up and apologise for being involved in a scandal." Which, you know, it might be foreshadowing to what happens in the main series with the attack on the summer camp and the whole apology tour that he and the teachers have to do with all of that, but I'd like to think it's more of a general, almost cancel culture joke. Though, to make it more relevant and biblically accurate, he'd either need to do a case of him, you know, putting a post on social media where it'd be a black background with white text on the front of it, or possibly with him doing a video with him on the sofa apologising to everybody, but the start of that video would have to be him just adjusting the camera to make it look like it's all spontaneous and it isn't scripted. Or alternatively, he would ignore the scandal, call out the people that are holding him to basic human standards, then doubling down on whatever legal or immoral thing that he did to get him in trouble in the first place, you know? Potato, potato, that's the world that we live in at the moment. But still, I like just the way that he comes out of it, because that's the joke that I was just thinking in the back of my head when just before it ends up coming through. So it's just, yeah, I just really like that. That really tickled me. I really enjoyed that one. And like I say, we do get this costume montage of Eraserhead and the Crab Cop in various different disguises, and that stuff is fun, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's just a page of just panels of them in different costumes and different designs and different scenarios, and it's fun for what it is. It packs a lot into a neat space of time. It doesn't overstay any of its welcome, and all the panels are exactly as big as they need to be to get the point across of what they're doing. And I like it, and most of them feature Eraserhead either looking miserable or getting into a fight with someone, or a combination of both. So, you know, maybe or maybe not, you know, people that he's getting into fights with are involved in this investigation, or he's just got a bit of a short temper with all of this. I don't know, but it just makes me end up thinking that, yeah, maybe we need to get the suit ready because he's going to be falling in a scandal or two after all of this. But still, it's all paced well. The pacing of this episode, again, is very impeccably well done. It's presented well and enjoyable, and I really do enjoy it. It just feels as though nothing overstays its welcome. Nothing lingers too long, and by the end of it, it feels just concrete. It feels solid. It feels as though we made genuine progress here, and it feels as though every composite aspect of this episode is good for what it is. Now, I understand that we're starting to get further into the review, and understand that time's starting to get short, so I'll keep this one brief. I do like the way in which it's able to bring in cast members from the main series. The presence of Eraserhead and Fat Gum, and to a lesser extent Crab Cop Lady, even though she's from this series, I think is done in a way which feels practical. They aren't there for the sake of being there. They are there because they have something practical to add to the situation. They have some expertise or knowledge that is bringing themselves into this, and I do like that, and I do respect that, as it makes it feel as though they actually are adding something to here, and not just being brought in for the sake of fan service. And I'd rather that this was the model which we worked with all of this, rather than, you know, oh, it's been a while since we saw someone from the main series, who should we get in? Let's consult the wheel of names, let's go! Oh, look, it's time for All Might to appear for a page. Sure! Woohoo! Woohoo! And who are we going to get next? Oh, it's Eraserhead. What can he do? He can sit in a shop and drink coffee and contribute nothing to the episode, when then maybe do something that one of the main characters should have done. Woohoo! But still, whatever, we'll actually now pivot into the negatives, and the only negatives I have is that this all, as much as I enjoy it, it does feel like the beginning of the beginning, more so than anything else. This does feel like the very early salvo into something more interesting, and there's a part of me that worries that this more interesting thing will either get put to the side, or it will end up overriding the stuff with the Sky Egg gig. I hope that both, if they are going to be done at the same time, that they're able to interweave quite as well as what we've had the past couple episodes, and it doesn't feel like this stuff that we had with the Pop Step gig from a few volumes ago, and that being bounced about with the stuff with Knuckle Duster and his daughter. I hope they can balance all this well, but we'll soon see about that. But like I say, my issue is the fact this feels like the beginning of a beginning. It doesn't feel as though there's any great progress here. Only short, the stuff that we get with Eraserhead and the Crab Cop is fun, but it's just fun. It doesn't really build to anything, and that's fine. But it does feel as though, given how much time is spent setting all this up, that something more significant should be coming through, and hope that comes through in the next few episodes or so. But still, with all that said, let's get into the overview and say that this is a very enjoyable episode. I think it's well constructed, well put together, with some fun moments within it, and I'm really looking forward to see where all this ends up going. What we'll end up seeing, like I say, balance is the key here. If they can balance both this and something to do with Crawler, then great. Or Captain Celebrity. I have the worry that one of these things is going to override the other, but we'll soon see about all that. Well, that's said and done, however, now it's time for Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner, and now we have comments from the previous video, which was a review of the episode titled Farewell Party, and we have a comment from BigZex1 who says, I enjoy the move this volume makes. It feels more like the anime with how it is written. Thank you for your comment. I have to say is that this episode and the previous episode that you're talking to do have a pacing that feels a little bit more like you're watching some kind of, or rather you're reading some kind of adaptation of the anime. Given how it's all paced and put together, it certainly feels closer to that than certainly what we've had thus far. I will say is that for my feelings, positive or negative, of the volume thus far, what I will say is it is more of a comfortable read, and it does feel as though the overall pace is being maintained in a way which I do respect and I do enjoy a lot more. Even if certain aspects of it aren't quite to my liking, I have to say that at the very least it is still enjoyable to read, and I do respect that they're able to just cover a lot of ground in what little length that they have for each of these episodes. With that said, however, let me know what you thought about this particular episode in the comment section down below. I have realised that we are getting closer and closer to the big anime. It's still only a couple of months away, so we'll see what happens with that when it comes up. But between then and now, I'll say thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!